We're talking with Reverend Enoch Purvis in New Albany, Mississippi, who grew up, or at least knew Martha's daddy, Mr. Billie Randolph, back in 1938. And why don't you just tell us where you were born and your early days and what you did and how you knew Mr. Randolph and what you did in your family and so forth.
I was born in Union County near Blue Springs, Mississippi.
Okay.
When I was 6 months old, I had bronchopneumonia. I thought I was going to die, but as I said, by the providence of God, I'm still here. Anyway, my father answered the call to the ministry. I was 2 years old. We moved about 180 miles to Newton, Mississippi. And we were there until I was 16 years old. Daddy came back to North Mississippi after my sister had finished school, and he applied for her teaching position at Ellistown Baptist Church. And so we moved back here, and then the next year Daddy taught school with my sister Milk. In the summers, we went up in a little farm called the Randolph farm some in the summer. My dad didn't get to school back that winter, so Dad was up in New Albany, Mississippi. He was inquiring about a place to live, and he met Mr. Jack Randolph. Went home with Mr. Jack Randolph and spent the night. He decided that he would go ahead and move up there. So Mr. Randolph moved us in a wagon. Now this was the good old days. Y'all don't understand about this situation.
Now, when you say Jack Randolph, you're talking about Stonewall Jackson Randolph, who was Billie Randolph's father.
Right. I didn't know the Stonewall, I don't guess. Anyway, I had lay out of school a while. It was the middle section of the year, so I decided to start back to school with Billie. We went to Buena Vista High School, and so I liked it so well, so I just stayed on that half a year and stayed the next year. Didn't learn much, but I enjoyed being with the people. And anyway, we graduated. But the last 4 months, my dad had moved away again, and so Billie said, "Enoch, you just stay with us." Well, I spoke to Mr. Randolph, and he said, well, Mag's the cook, that's the mother.
Okay.
And of course, we didn't have any money. I did a little work there, milked a cow, brought in a little wood. And I would tell Mr. Randolph on the weekend, I said, now let's go cut some wood or do something. No, you go on home. So I would walk several miles home, come back on Sunday afternoon. And so after we finished up, then I went back down to my father's and helped him make a crop. And after that, I decided, well, I'm going somewhere and get some work. I didn't go on to college at that time. So I went to Jackson, Mississippi. I lived with my aunt and uncle. And worked at a cooking candy shop in Jitney Jungle. I think I made about 17 and a half weeks, something like that, if I got a whole week. Anyway, while I was at the Randolphs, I met all the family. Hazel lived in New Albany, Pansy in Memphis, Lucille in Montgomery. I think I'm telling this correct. And of course, Janie had been in the service sometime. I met all of these. I'm not sure. And I met Josh Randolph, who, after moving back down here where I am, I was asked to do his funeral. I don't suppose you were here at that time. But anyway, Well, while I was, after I'd worked about 9 months in Jackson, I decided to just join the service because I was going to be drafted in a few months anyway. So I joined the Army Air Corps, went to MacDill Field, and let's see, I can't think of the name of the place anyway. Stayed there a little while anyway, went back up to Orlando, Florida, and we stayed there for over a year. Then went to New York, Mitchell Field, New York, and Josh contacted me. He said, come up and spend the night with me. So I came up and spent the night with him, and we went out and played some games, and I think maybe I won over him. What is they call them when you roll the balls?
Bowling.
Bowling.
Yeah.
He said, now I know that you've been playing somewhere. I've never played in my life, but he said I won over him. But anyway, I didn't have too much more.
And what town was this in?
It was in New York,
In New York.
City. See, I was out at Mitchell Field, which is 40 miles from New York City.
Do you do your training in Mitchell Field?
No, I more or less did my training on the job starting at Orlando, Florida. We had an old B-17 when the war broke out, and they alerted us all to give us a gun and all that stuff. It was really something there for a little while. But we finally got some other planes, finally got some B-25s. And we went from there to New York. We did anti-submarine patrol out over the ocean. I mostly was on the ground mechanic, but I did fly as an engineer a little while. And we went from there to Westover Field, Massachusetts. Stayed there a while. From there we went to Newfoundland. Stayed there nearly 6 months. Came back and was transferred to Chatham Field, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia. Made a little swing out west. They sent us out there on a train. Got out there. It took 2 or 3 days to get out there, and when I got there, then they give us a furlough home, and I had to turn right around and go home. Went back out of Salt Lake City, and then they flew us to Savannah, Georgia. We trained there a little bit, and then we were sent to Africa. Well, I flew to Trinidad, and they put us off there. Some of them was falling in the drink going across that ocean, and I didn't even have any orders or anything. I was just there for about 9 days. When a plane came along, picked us up and carried us over in the area where our group was. We didn't know where they was. I went uptown and just had on my old coveralls, and this colonel come up and said, what are you boys doing dressed up there like this? And asked what rank it was, and they wouldn't say nothing. Finally I told them I was a sergeant. He said, we're going up to headquarters, and I'll be up there a little bit. He would have gone on then, but there's another officer came and talked to him. In the meantime, as our truck came along, some of my boys, I crawled on that truck, and I had never seen that.
And this is North Africa.
Yes. And then we stayed there about 2 months, trained there some, went over to Venezuela, Italy. And we were there until the war was over in the eastern part. We came back down to Naples and stayed there until we caught a boat to Trinidad. They picked us up at Trinidad and sent us to Natal, Brazil. And we were working on planes that they were ferrying boys through after the war. And I had enough time in, so they called me up one day and said, we're sending you home on points. So I came to Greenville, Mississippi, went from there, had a furlough, came to Montgomery, Alabama, and got my discharge.
What year was this?
That was 1945.
Okay.
I went in the service October 28, 1940, came out October the 5th, 1945.
So you were already in before the war?
Oh, yes.
But before we got into war?
Yes, sir.
Of course, England was already in there.
See, I was 21 years old when I was going to be drafted. In fact, they were looking for me. and I was in the service.
Now, was this the Air Force?
Yes,
Yeah,
what is
okay.
it, Army Air Corps?
Army Air Corps. My father was in what he called the Army Air Force. And they went over to India and China and flew the hump.
Yeah, he was over the Western.
Who was your general? Who was leading all that at that time?
He has the hard questions.
Right now, well, I know him was my own, but I can't think. I was in the 15th Air Force.
15th Air Force. We could look that up.
Well, I know that, but I
That's
missed
okay.
Now Patton was over there with the Army, right?
Right.
He was over there going into Sicily and Italy.
General Eisenhower, I believe, was over us.
Okay, I bet that's right.
Yeah, I think he was.
Okay.
And later on, you know, he came home and was president. That pretty well ended my time in the service. They tried to get us to re-enlist. Well, I kind of got away from the Randolphs.
Well, that's okay.
That's fine.
I mentioned the fact that we were moved up there in a wagon. There was kind of a funny incident. Mr. Randolph and Daddy were walking. It was muddy roads, bad weather, and of course we didn't have the blacktop like we do have now. And I was driving mules, but he had the third mule hooked to the wagon also, and went over on the side of the road and thought they wouldn't run as fast, you know, and they then kind of bogged down. Well, I said, whoa, and when I did, they stopped, and when I said, get up, old kid pulled down on the tongue and bursted the tongue. So we had to, Daddy happened to know Mr. Swan. He went over to Mr. Swan's and borrowed a tongue and put back in the wagon, and we went on home. And I don't know, it was a good little while before Mr. Randolph had a tongue made for his wagon and carried, and it was several miles now from where we were to Mr. Randolph's.
Now, what was the tongue for?
The tongue goes in a wagon.
Oh, okay.
You know, like a tongue that you pull in a little.
He's a city boy.
No, I just didn't use a wagon.
There were two mules, you know. There's a tongue in the center to pull the wagon, and a mule on each side.
Okay.
And what happened, the third mule was out in front, hooked on the tongue.
Oh,
And see,
okay, I got you.
when she came up before the others did, the wagon didn't move, and she pulled it down and bursted that tongue.
Okay.
Anyway, we got on up there, and like I said, I started school with Billie, and in the spring then my dad caught pneumonia, had double pneumonia, abscess on his lung, like to die, and he was sick 3 or 4 months. He looked worse then than he looked a lot worse than he did when he died. But anyway, he finally got over it, and I did most of the plowing and work, and he was strong enough that he carried the fertilizer and put in the hoppers and all that stuff. So we made that crop there. I even thought about the mules. As I said, one of them was named Kit, one of them was named Kate, one of them was named Hattie. And then Curtis Randolph was the oldest son. He lived over on the east side of Mr. Randolph's house. We lived on the south side. Well, Curtis, Mr. Randolph had 2 horses, and they had a school wagon. Now that again, you don't know what I'm talking about, but instead of going in a truck or a bus, he carried children home in a school wagon. He would carry them over to school, had a place to hook up the team. He'd walk across the bottom back home, and then in the afternoon he'd go back and he'd bring the children. One of my sisters rode in that school wagon. She later became a school teacher. But anyway, they had a horse that's named Frisky. I know one time we were went to a church, and Billie was riding Frisky, and we were riding some of the other horses. And when we got back now, after going to church, we came back by a watermelon patch, and they wanted to get in the watermelons, and did get in the watermelon patch, and that Billie went and drove his little Frisky, and she was Frisky, in that patch, and when he started up on her with the watermelon, he dropped the watermelon and bursted it right there.
Oh, no.
And I thought, oh my goodness, my dad's going to find out about this. This is going to be terrible.
Was this your daddy's watermelon patch?
No, it wasn't. This is a Mr. Whitten's patch.
Okay.
And some of them found out about it, but somewhere or other my dad never did.
Did find out.
Never did.
What did y'all grow? You grow cotton?
We grew cotton. Had a garden, and I reckon that's all we grew was cotton. I think maybe we didn't make a whole lot of, I think we made 5 bales of cotton or something like that. And of course, he was furnishing all the equipment and stuff, and we were working on the hay, so we only got 2.5 bales. So you can imagine how rich we got. We more or less had to live at home, you know, out of the garden, and had some cows and chickens, and I don't remember if we had a hog or what. But anyway, that's about the way it went.
You had brothers and sisters?
I have sisters.
Sisters.
Got four sisters. One of them is dead. My youngest sister married a preacher, and he was from Jackson, Mississippi, and he had retired. He kind of retired early, I think, and moved back to the place that we grew up in Newton, Mississippi. She was sick, but she got a little better, and they sent her home. So she, I don't know where all that in there.
That's fine. We'll keep. That's fine.
She told Gus that my shoulder's hurting me real bad. You just lay down here by me, and maybe it'll get easy. And then she had to take a dose of medicine, so he got up to get her medicine, and he heard a noise, and he looked back, and she drew her last breath.
Wow.
He said she didn't even have time to tell me goodbye. And she was the youngest, and my oldest sister is 4 years older than I am. She's 88.
She's still living.
And will be 89. Still drives a car occasionally and gets her groceries and stuff.
Very good.
She doesn't see very well. She was a school teacher. My daddy was a school teacher, along with farming and so on. And my sister, then younger than me, was a school teacher. And then the baby girl that died was a school teacher.
Now, you went to school with Billie Randolph, too.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about the school you went to?
Finished at Buena Vista High School. Well, it was just a country school, and like I said, I only liked a year finishing school, and I took English, and I didn't take any more than I had to. I think I started out on second year algebra or something, and I'd forgot all about what first year algebra did. I think I dropped that one. It was just a ordinary school. I don't remember even how many pupils they had. They didn't even have gyms very much then. But this church, this school, had built them a gym, and they used just some old rough lumber and stuff to build it. Some of the other schools, Loss and Claus, played ball, and they played on a dirt court.
I remember those.
Do you remember anything called a singing school in the summertime?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about that? That's sort of
After Loss and I married, we lived out in the Ellistown community, which is now the East Union community. Still have a church there by the name of Ellistown. My father's brother was a singer, and in the summertime he would teach singing schools. And one summer, after Lois and I married, he came out there and taught a singing school. And he would teach some music with it. And we learned enough that he made us sing a song. That's about all I learned out of the music. But now, those that knew how to or would apply themselves, they learned a good bit of music. You know. My wife, she can play a little bit. She just more or less has learned to play herself.
But a singing school was sort of traditional back then.
Well, yeah, they would have, a lot of the communities would have singing schools, and then they would meet together and have singing. Some of the older group really enjoyed going from place to place.
When you were younger with Billie and Josh, do you remember going to singing school when you were young?
No, sir. That's the only school I ever went to. Now, when we lived in Newton, to my knowledge, they didn't have singing schools. They had a glee club. My dad pastored little rural churches, quarter-time churches, which again you don't know about. He pastored one half-time church. That meant that you preached twice a month.
So your dad was a pastor also?
Yes, sir.
As well as
That's how we ended up at Newton. We moved down there, and he hadn't even finished his high school, so he finished his high school and started at Clark College. And then he had some churches. One year we lived down in another county near Forest, Mississippi. And then we moved back up there to Newton, and that's when my sister started school and finished school, moved back up here to teach. And she was married when we moved to Randolph now. I had me and 3 other sisters was the ones that lived at Randolph.
Now, tell us how you got into the ministry. You got called into the ministry.
Well, just as I got out of the service, my family and I went along with my dad and them over to a little church that had previously burned, and they were dedicating this new church building. And there was an old preacher from Blue Mountain. He had preached there in this area in different places. I didn't know him, but he got up and he said, "My, how the Lord has blessed us. We ought to love him and more serve him." And the Lord spoke to me just like that, you know. Well, when I got outside, it kind of lifted, you know. And I never did tell anybody except I told one of my cousins. I said, I may have to preach someday. But see, my daddy had such a hard time preaching in the water. We had a little Model A, not a Model A, a Model T Ford car. He finally got up enough money to get a Model T Ford. Well, during that depression hit, and he had to just set the old car up, couldn't run it, couldn't buy gas, or couldn't buy a tag, walked to his churches, caught a ride, whatever he could do, and had to farm, teach school, or whatever he could do to sort of get by, feed those 5 hungry mouths. And I thought, well, that's not for me, and I'll have to go to school. And in the meantime, I want to get married and do something else. And so that's what I did. Well, after Lois and I married, I was up in Tipper County, Farmer Church. And this Brother Grubbs preached a powerful sermon. Well, it hit me again. I thought, well, I'm going to have to go and see this old preacher and tell him what's happening. After I got out of there and went on to the reeds, that kind of lifted again, so I let it go again. I finally did tell Lois one time. I said, "The Lord's dealing with me." She said, "Well, you'll have to take care of that yourself." I'm not the one to decide that. Well, I sold my little farm out at East. That's what I was doing. Farming, growing cotton and corn and hay and hogs and chickens and milking cows. And I don't know, things wasn't going so well or something. Well, I know what happened. We were baling hay, and it looked like it was going to rain every day, and the hay baler broke down, had a new baler, and it wouldn't work. I said, I'm just going to sell this place and quit. And this fellow said, well, what do you want for it? And I named the price, and he went up to the store and told it, and next thing you know, I had a buyer. So I either had to back out or, so I sold it and rented a place out there for a year. In the meantime, I found this place. I had a house right across the road. And so I started farming. I found out it wasn't as good a land, milking a few cows, doing the same thing. So I got a job working at a furniture factory. And, in the meantime, we were having a revival at Northside Church, just in the edge of town. The same church that moved up here across the road. And there was an evangelist there that was just preaching as hard as he could. If you got too close to him, he'd spit on you. He was going so fast, you know. But he said, he used the scripture in Hebrews, how shall we escape if we neglect a great salvation? And of course, that was what I was doing. I was neglecting telling people what I was supposed to do. But that was on Sunday night, I think, and I was trying to work and about half crying out there, working that upholstery. And on Friday night, I thought, well, I'm going to tell the preacher what's happening. And we were having this, well, first thing you know, Lois invited 6 preachers to come eat supper with her. One of them got lost, and when we got back down there, we had this little prayer meeting. It was time to go into church. And I finally did get Brother Oaks over to one side and told him that the Lord was dealing with me. He said, well, he won't ever get out of it if he is. I fought the call for 4 years. And I said, well, this has been my call for 15 and a half years. Well, the preacher preached, and I don't know a word he said. But at the end of when he gave the invitation, I went up and told him what I was supposed to do. And he said, well, just get out in here and tell the Lord about it. And so me and him and Brother Oaks got out on our knees, and I said, well, Lord, if you'll take care of my wife and children, I'll do what I can. So I worked about a year there and quit and started back to school. About 3 or 4 months after I started back to school, my wife had to go to work. She just worked on the farm, you know. Of course, we still had a little crop and stuff. The boys had got big enough, they was milking a few cows. I answered the call of the ministry in April. And in December, 1st of December, first Sunday in December, I started pastoring this church at Billie Baptist Church in Union County.
And what year was this?
1961.
1961.
And see, I started in April. I surrendered in April of 61 and started working with churches. The first Sunday I worked with Billie Church. The second Sunday I went up into Academy, which is behind the cotton plant area in Tipper County, and I started working with them. Well, I worked with them for 2 years, I think. Well, yeah, 2 years with both churches. We got the Academy Church to go full time, so I gave up the Billie Church and started going full time, preaching every Sunday. The Academy Church. I stayed there 4 or 5 years, and there's a church called me over west of the Harmony Baptist Church. And I was over there 13 years. I went down in Calhoun County and was there a little while, and my younger son got sick with manic depression. And so we decided to move back, and that's when I went up to Palmer Church in Tipper County. Lois would go down and try to help him a little bit. After a few months, his wife went back home, and he was more or less buzzed. Well, they had one little baby. Of course, I didn't blame her. We loved her, still do. She just couldn't live with him, the condition he was in. And he had that trouble for several years. And he's finally better now. He remarried, had 2 more children. We got 2 young, the oldest one was his first wife, is married now. The other 2